With the help of Hashem, we are learning Megila Daf Chaf. We left off on Daf Yutes on the base. We're going to start again from the beginning of the Gemara. We are really learning about whether a deaf person, referred to here as a chedesh, and as we learned to Tosfos that normally in Shas, chedesh means a deaf mute. Obviously, in our sugya, the chedesh cannot mean a mute because we're speaking about someone who's reading the Megillah. And the question is whether a person who's able to speak, the person's physical challenge is that the person cannot hear. That's the meaning of chedesh, a deaf person, whether he can read the Megillah in public or not. What's the issue? The issue is that there are not only Megillah, but there are many things that in Judaism, in Yiddishkeit, in mitzvahs, we have to read. For example, the Shema. What is the definition of reading? Does verbalizing mean your lips moving and sounds coming out? A chedesh can do that. Does reading mean hashma la'aznecha, that your ears have to hear that which is leaving your lips? If that's the definition of reading, of being koire, well, this person is basically exempt from the reading of the Megillah because he's unable to do so. If he's unable to do so, that means if he's not obligated, not his fault, if he's not obligated, he can't read it for someone else who is obligated. So the topic really today, and as will be all of the topics on Daf Chav, everything today is going to be a lot larger than only Megillah, even though it's also going to be Megillah related. And as we will learn, there's going to be a three-way machlokas tanoim. We're going to focus a lot as to define or to ascertain what is the opinion of Rebbe Yehuda, which is not that clear initially. And here are the options. Either if you can't hear, even post facto, even b'di'evet, you can't read the Megillah, or if you read the Shema and you actually didn't hear what you are saying, you got to repeat it post facto. The opposite side is, even lechatchila, it doesn't bother me. You read it, you moved your lips and sounds came out. And the in-between will be, it's not lechatchila, but it's only b'di'evet. There are indeed all of these three opinions in the Tanoim. The question will be, what is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? And that will clarify who is the author of the Mishnah on Daf Yutes Amud Beis. On Daf Chav, and by the way, we're going to also speak a little bit about the level of the obligation of on a minor, which is a fascinating topic, because the Mishnah also mentioned the machlokas Tanoim, whether a katan is allowed to read the Megillah. A katan is certainly not obligated to do anything on a biblical level. The answer is, you're right, but don't forget that the whole Yom Tov of Purim is only rabbinic. So someone who's obligated on the level of midrabanan, l'chayra, should be allowed to read the Megillah for someone else. But that's not so simple. We can say the katan is a double derabanan. There are different ways that this is worded. We're going to share a very foundational sikh of the Rebbe in Chelik Yud Zayin Kedoshim Dalit, that on occasion I repeat it because my great teacher, Rabbi Leibel Shapiro, the Rosh Yeshiva in Miami, we used that as a yisoid for many of the shiurim that he gave us in Megila for 2 years. And as we'll speak it out when we learn the Gemara on Daf Chav, it's going to be gavaldik today, and I really hope we'll catch up. We're going to define the meaning of the day of daytime. In other words, there are many mitzvahs that have to be done during the daytime, like the mitzvah of reading the Megillah during the day. Then you have the mitzvah of doing a bris milah, which can only be done during the day. In almost all cases, going to the mikvah can only be done during the day. People that are impure, that have corpse tuma, and they have to have, amongst other steps, they have to have the ashes of the paraduma sprinkled on them on the third and on the seventh day. So we're going to clarify from when does the day begin and when does the day end. And that's going to lead us into the next Mishnah, Daf Chaf Amud Beis. That's going to speak about other mitzvahs that have to be performed at night. What's the definition of night? And as we will see, that all of the nocturnal mitzvahs indeed may be performed midoraisa throughout the entire night. So we're going to learn today a little bit. We're going to touch upon this fuzzy area known as Alois HaShachar, from Alois HaShachar until Nates. We are more familiar because we learned brachas about this Bein Hashmashes time of the day, Safek Yom, Safek Laila, or a time for itself that is like a twilight. Less, at least we spoke less about this time of Alois HaShachar. However, we'll interpret it in English. But when the day begins, right, there's sunrise. But then you have this period that, according to most opinions, is 1 hour and 1/5 of an hour, Zmaniyos, prior to sunrise. That's called the Alois Hashachar, whether you're going to say it's called the crack of dawn, or when the eastern horizon starts to lighten up. What is that? Is that day or is that not day? Are the mitzvahs that one needs to perform during the day, may they be performed then or not? This will be the main big Shas topics of today and much, much more. The first part will be very easy. We're going back to Daf Yutes Amud Beis. So the Mishnah said that everyone is qualified to read the Megillah. And again, we have to know the taich. Everything we learned on Daf Daled includes women who may not read the Megillah. The mute, not the deaf, someone who's halachically, mentally incapable or not developed, called a shoita, which we will not focus on today, and the minor, which means a man or a woman in our case, because a woman is, by the Mishnah, by the law, can read the Megillah, but prior to Barabas mitzvah, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that a minor is allowed to read. That is the Mishnah. Now, Chedesh may not read. The Havamina, as we at least started yesterday, is that the Chedesh may not read even b'diavad. And by the way, that will be the case of a shoita. A shoita is someone who halachically is completely exempt of all the mitzvahs. And if a shoita read the Megillah in public, even post facto, l'kula alma, that reading has no halachic weight. No one was yoitza. So based on the premise that the same is by a Chedesh, even post facto is not qualified to read the Megillah. So says the Gemara, Man, Tanach, Chedesh, even the Evet, Namilai, Amarav Masna, our Mishnah can only be Rabbi Yossi and not Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanan, this Mishnah is not about Megillah, but we are connecting them, and this connection will remain throughout. HaKoyres HaShema, we have the great mitzvah of reading the Shema twice a day biblically. Someone read the Shema, not only did the lips move, but sounds came out, but the ears of the reader did not hear his own sounds, his own words. So the Tanakama, we are going to go, is the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, says Yatsa. Now, guys, this means lachatchila, it's not good. If you did it and you heard it, Yatsa means b'diavad, or like Dr. Baruch likes using the word post facto, you're good. Rabbi Yossi holds even b'diavad lo Yatsa. Okay, so first of all, there's nothing wrong with establishing that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi, right? But the Gemara is going to insist until the end that perhaps our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. Now, when you find such an insistence, so Tosfos, it's second to last, enlightens the whole approach. Tosfos is explaining why will we continuously try to make our Mishnah work according to Rabbi Yehuda, because we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. And that's another klali hashas that we'll have to spend some time on. Because whenever you learn a sugya and the Gemara is trying to make a Mishnah or a Braisa, Tana, dafka go according to someone's opinion. Was Brent? Like it fits perfectly well if the Mishnah is Rabbi Yossi. There's no problem with that. Because since we know we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, we prefer for Rabbeinu HaKadosh, for his Stam Mishnah. And don't forget the Tanakama in our Mishnah Stam. It's an anonymous Mishnah to fit with Allah. So let's go. Rabbi,
I thought Rabbi Yossi versus Rabbi Yehuda, we passed him like Rabbi Yossi.
That is very right. That is good. So we have to go back to that. In our case, we pass him like Rabbi Yehuda. Then you're right. And another thing, when we learned that sugya about who we pass him like, there are many exceptions. Like everything else. Everything has an exception. Okay. And based on the fact that you're learning Pshat in our Mishnah, that even the Eved Namiloi, maybe our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. Who is the Tanakama in the Mishnah of the din of reading Shema. And ulechatchila hu daloi. All our Mishnah means is that if you are only able to speak, you can't hear, deaf, don't read it lechatchila. Hadiyavet shapi dami. Our Mishnah can be Rabbi Yehuda. Counters the Gemara now, lois al kadaitach. Because since the Mishnah puts together the Chedesh and the Shoit and the Katan, because the Tani, Chedesh, Dumia, the Shoit and the Katan, and Lechura, they all are equally not valid, and not Shoit and the Katan, according to the Tanakama, even the Yevad Namiloi, to make the Mishnah more symmetric, Af Chedesh, the Yevad Namiloi. And the Gemara is insisting, not necessarily true. It would be nicer that way. Doesn't always work that way. Counters the Gemara, again, asking, maybe the Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. The Dilma, Hakid the Isa, Hakid the Isa. Notice when the Mishnah says Chutz Michedesh only means Lachatchila a Chedesh shouldn't read. The Diavad good. Chutz Shoyte v'Katan even the Diavad. Count as the Gemara nish. No, can't be that the Tanach is Rabbi Yehuda because me the Tani Sefer Rabbi Yehuda machshav b'katan clear. Ha, Michlal Deresh is not Rabbi Yehuda. Normally you would stop here. Again, that's the Tosfos in enlightening us. We're really making an effort. So the Gemara says no, Vaitin, maybe it's Rabbi Yehuda. The Dilma Kol Rabbi Yehudi. The Gemara says it can't be. The problem isn't that the Mishnah writes in middle, Rabbi Yehuda holds. That we can always get around with. Many times we have that. That even the Tanakh is the same author, and it's as if it says, because Rabbi Yehuda says. Problem is that they say opposite things. Umidami. Reisha, whoever the author of the Reisha is, writes that a katan is not allowed to read the Megillah. The Sefer writes clearly, Machshir can be Rabbi Yehuda. Weiter, the Gemara says, still, I'll insist, the Dilma Kula Rabbi Yehudi. None of us then, listen to this, listen to how we're trying so hard. Today, Gavne Katan Ktani, maybe we're speaking about two ages, two stages, ages, halachic statuses of a katan. Let me say it out by heart. You have a concept of a katan that reached the age of chinuch, which is such a phenomenal topic. Very importantly, Rashi over here says that the age of chinuch for a katan in Purim is similar to the age of fasting for Yom Kippur. Not the whole day, if you remember, in Yuma, dafka taina shah is for a minor. So Rashi says we're speaking about a minor that's 9 or 10 years old. That's a minor that's called a minor that reached the age of chinuch. Maybe that minor is where Rabbi Yehuda is machshir, and the Reisha, which is also Rabbi Yehuda, is speaking about a minor that did not reach that age. Now let me go a little bit just to share the words of the Rebbe. The question is, even if we're speaking also about a minor that reached the age of chinuch, I'm asking you, upon whom is the chiyuv of chinuch? On the father or on the child? Let me tell you why this question is important. Because there's a rule. I can only do something for you if we share the same level of obligation. And I get it that the whole Purim is only midrabanan. So it doesn't bother me that chinuch is midrabanan. The only chinuch midairaisa is teaching Torah as a specific v'shinamtam levanecha. Okay, fine. But l'chu'ura, the obligation is only on the father. The father is mechuyev to be mechanech his children. So the child, how can you say the child is chayiv? He's a minor. Why does it help that he's that he's up to that age? And the way the Rebbe frames it, and this becomes a machlokes l'shitosei of Rashi and Tosfos throughout Shas, Rambam and Ravid throughout Shas. Let's focus on Shitas HaRambam, because the Sikha begins Shitas HaRambam regarding a minor that becomes an adult between Pesach Rishon and Pesach Sheni. That the Rambam many times uses the words katan chayiv. I know only midrabanan, but how can you say he's chayiv? And the nekuda is one of the examples that Rebbe gives, which is which helps us approach it easier. That there's the great mitzvah of pru uravu, for example, that we know that the chiyuv of pru uravu is on the man. A woman is not mechuyev to have children. Yet, the Ran writes that if she chooses to have children, it's not only that she's doing a mitzvah, she is fulfilling the mitzvah of pru uravu. But God didn't command her. How can she be fulfilling the mitzvah rab of pru uravu? And the answer is, because since God gave the man a mitzvah of pru uravu, and the only way you can do it is with his wife, so even though she's not mechuyev on the level that if she won't do it, she won't be punished for not having children, she did not lift up her hands from her obligation, but when she opts in, we can say the words that she's part of the mitzvah. Ad kedei kach, that when she doesn't, she gets the mitzvah rab of pru uravu. And that's the big topic of machshirei mitzvah. How much chashivus do you imbue in machshirei mitzvah? As we learned in the Shabbos, Daf Kuf Lamed, right, Rabbi Eliezer de Milo. In other words, since you can't do a bris milah without having a knife, so could you say that there is a chiyuv to prepare the knife? And if that would be the case, so then that preparing of the knife is also doiches Shabbos. That's the machlokes tanoim over there. Since a father can only be mechanech his son if he has a son, so we view the son as the machshir of the mitzvah for the father. And therefore the chashivus of the mitzvah gets carried over to the son. Thus, Shitas and Rambam holds the son is chayiv. And that will explain this entire sugya. So when you have a son that reaches the age of chinuch, lechatchilam, the chiyuv was only on the father. But since the father can only fulfill it when his son does the mitzvah, so when the son does the mitzvah, you can say that the son is fulfilling a mitzvah midrabanan. And therefore, that's Rabbi Yehuda and the Seifa. He can be moitzi everyone else in the room whose chiyuv is also only midrabanan, but so is the katans. Let's go by. Now, according to Rashi, under age 9 or under the age 10, there is a little bit of a leeway which depends on the maturity of the child. And since the father is mechuyev to be mechanechim, therefore it's shaykh to say that he's included in the chiyuv midrabanan. So afilu lechatchila. And as the Mishnah then says, Rabbi Yehuda machsher b'katan. What will be the advantage? Again, Tosfos. At least the Rebbe, the Mishnah, will follow the halacha, which is Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Gemara says it can be.
How are we getting a woman in here, though, at this point?
We're not getting.
I mean, not a woman, a cherish. Meaning, okay, he's machsher a katan. Okay, now what? How do we see that it would be okay?
Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda holds, Rabbi Yehuda holds that on a b'diavad level, if I read the Shema but I didn't hear what I said, I'm yotzei. And therefore, since on a b'diavad level it's okay, when the Mishnah writes for the Mishnah to be Rabbi Yehuda, when the Mishnah writes that everyone is kosher to read the Megillah chutz, let's just focus now on the chedesh. It only means chutz mechedesh lechatchila. But b'diavad the chedesh can read. So at Khan we have two shitas. One shita is that it's a chedesh, even though he doesn't hear, is kosher b'diavad. That will be the shita of Rabbi Yehuda. Or we have the shita of Rabbi Yossi that holds that even on a b'diavad level, it's not good. Continues the Gemara, but my Yokim Teke Rabbi Yehuda and Udiavad means that on a b'diavad level, even the chedesh Danny will be good, not the woman. The hakoil is the woman. We're focusing on the chedesh. Now we have a problem. If that's the case, Elyahu the Tani. We have a brayse that quotes Rabbi Yehuda. The Reid, the Rav Shimon ben Pazi. Chedesh hamedaber ve'eno shameya. In the unusual chedesh, only death. It's amazing chedin. We're speaking about separating truma. Now, why do you have to speak or hear to separate truma? You don't. But you know what? Before you separate truma, you have to make a bracha. Same question. If a person makes any bracha, but they don't hear what they said, did they make a bracha? And this Tana is based on the premise that you can only do a mitzvah on a lachatchila dika level if you're able to make the bracha. Of course, if you didn't make a bracha before the mitzvah, if a person forgot to make the bracha before they put on tefillin, after the fact, post facto, they got the mitzvah of tefillin. But lachatchila, truma is not a choivas gavra. So if I can do it or you can do it, but I can't make a bracha and you could, lachatchila, you should do it. Says this Tana, that a person who's able to speak, even though he's unable to hear, separate trumas, even though the person cannot hear the bracha that is made prior to the separation. Now the problem is, at Khan, we only are familiar with two Tanoim. We are learning pshat that Rabbi Yehuda, the evidence is okay. There was no one so far that we know of that allows lechatchila. So Mani, who will be the author of this brayso? Now, it's interesting. Why don't we just say it's the author is Rabbi Yehuda Bereid Rabbi Yeshua ben Pazi? But we're looking for a prior Tanach. Rabbi Yehuda the Evedin, but even Rabbi Yehuda holds that lechatchila not. If it's Rabbi Yossi the Eved Namiloi. And what are we trying to get at? We're trying to prove, therefore, that Rabbi Yehuda holds that even lechatchila, even though you can't hear, you can read the Shema. You can make a bracha, you can read the Shema, and if that will be the case, our Mishnah cannot be Rabbi Yehuda, because our Mishnah, right, Danny, is definitely saying at least lechatchila chutz mechedesh. So what will the answer be that the author is Rabbi Yehuda? And ba'afila lechatchila, with Rabbi Yehuda holds that lechatchila you can say the Shema. Why is the Mishnah that we quoted formulated? If you read the Shema, whether you yoitz or not. But again, Rabbi Yehuda holds you can do it lachatchila. If that would be the case, Vaited, I'll have another Braisa whose author will be question marked. A person should not bench in his heart. Foundational to understanding this quote, in his heart doesn't mean meditating the words. In his heart means exactly what we are talking about now. You're moving your lips, sounds are coming out, but it's so low, or there's so much noise in the airplane that it's not reaching your ears. The Braisa says that there is a Tana that says, Lechatchila, don't do it. If you did it, you're Yoitza. Now, if Rabbi Yehuda holds even Lechatchila, you can do it, then we don't know who the author of the Birchas Hamazon Braises is. Then Mani, Loi Rabbi Yehuda, Loi Rabbi Yosi. Because even Rabbi Yehuda filo Lechatchila, as we have that you can separate Truma. Rabbi Yosi filo the Eved Namaloi. In other words, let's clarify what is Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. And the Gemara says on Daf Chaf La'olam, I will tell you that this final brisa that we just learned, that says that Birchas Hamazon, that you can separate Truma and make a bracha lechatchila is Rabbi Yehuda. And guys, it's simple. If that's the case, our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. Vafilo lechatchila. So the question now is, who is the author? If Rabbi Yehuda holds, even lechatchila. Rabbi Yosi holds not even b'di'evet. Who is going to be the author of the Birchas Hamazon v'loy kashem? Ha didei. Again, the Braisa that's speaking about a chedesh lechatchila being allowed to separate truma, even though we can't hear the bracha, is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda proper. And the final Braisa we quoted on Matthew Testament days regarding Birchas Hamazon is the Rebbe of Rabbi Yehuda that holds that only post facto it's okay. So we do have three opinions. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Oimer Mishum Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, HaKoyre Shema Tzorach Shiashmiya Lo Ozno Shenemaru. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, which means Hashma Lo Oznecha Masha Ata Moitze Mipicha. And that means, again, we're learning over here that Lechatchila you have to hear. Rabbi Yehuda himself holds, even Lechatchila you don't have to hear. But Rabbi Yehuda Mishum Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah, and here we have Rabbi Meir, who we never had before, that holds when it says Asher Anoichi Mitzavcha Hayoim Al Levavecha, Taiches Rabbi Meir Achar Kavanas Halev Hein Advarim. Rabbi Meir holds that you b'chlal don't have to hear. The ikir is the kavana. Meir Einei Chachamim, not Yored L'Soif Datoi. That Meir is the pnimius. In the pnimius, the ikir is the kavana, and the external is less significant. Bottom line is, my friends, we have now three opinions. We have Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, who holds that even lechatchila, when the Torah says, say something, a bracha, birchas hamazon, reading the Megila, reading the Shema, if you said the words, you're good lechatchila. I don't care whether you heard it or not. You have the sheet of Rabbi Lozer ben Azariah that says it's only good with the Eved. And you have the opinion of Rabbi Yosi that holds even with the Eved it's not good. And again, our Mishnah will not be Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rabbi Yehuda holds that a chedesh can be lechatchila. And Nachamo, Tosfos is explaining, we're trying to come to the conclusion that our Mishnah could be Rabbi Yehuda. So now says the Gemara, Hashta la'asas lahachim. Now that you found the Braisa with Rabbi Meir, we were looking for the author. Now that we found the Rabbi Meir, that says clearly that lechatchila you don't have to hear. Afilu tema Rabbi Yehuda kerabe sfirale. That lechatchila you have to hear. And therefore, the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah could be Rabbi Yehuda. The Tani, Yehuda, Bereder, Rav Shimon ben Pazi. That what? That even a person, a chedesh, can lechatchila separate truma, even though they can't read the bracha, even lechatchila, that follows Rabbi Meir. In conclusion, we would prefer for Rabbi Yehuda to follow the shita of his Rebbe, allowing us to say that our Mishnah is shitas Rabbi Yehuda, that holds that lechatchila you should hear what you say, but b'di'evet it's okay even though you did not. Next, Rabbi Yehuda
question. So,
yes,
can someone who cannot separate truma because can someone say their bracha for the truma and the guy separates it? If
Obviously not. Whoever says the bracha should separate it. And Kevan, there's no doubt also that if someone b'chlal didn't make a bracha, their separation is 1,000% valid. but they did a mitzvah without making a bracha prior. That's the whole topic we had regarding birchas ha-mitzvahs. Let's go back. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. So now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda himself says a story to validate his opinion. Katan o yisi, when I was pre-bar mitzvah, obviously, l'shitas Rashi, he was over 9 or 10. Ukeresiha, I read the Megila, l'mayla mit Tarfin. I read it for Rav Tarfin and the other elders in Lud. Isn't that great? No, I'm not a das yachid. All of the chevra listened to my Megillah reading. You know what they told him? Listen to this. Amru loy ein mevi'in raya min hakatan. How great is that? How do we know that this happened? No one is saying Rabbi Yehuda is not saying the truth. But when was Rabbi Yehuda present to be aware that he, a minor, read the Megillah for adults? When he was there, he was a minor. So that's a big topic. Can someone who had an experience when they were a minor, can someone who witnessed something when they were a minor, can they testify it while they become adults? And that should have the halachic weight of us saying we have to take it into account. Do we rely halachically on the observations of a minor? And they told him, no, we don't. So therefore, your story, halachically, cannot be brought to the table. Similarly, Tanya Amar Rebbe had the same experience. Katan o Yisi, when I was a minor, Ukedesiya, and I read the Megillah, Lamayla mit Rabbi Yehuda. And it was okay. Now here, there's a double reason why that really cannot be brought into the conversation. Because in front of whom did he read the Megillah? In front of Rabbi Yehuda. Yashikoyach. Rabbi Yehuda is the one that said it's okay. So Amrullah, Emidianayim and Amatir. Just because we know Rabbi Yehuda is matir, so you read it in front of Rabbi Yehuda doesn't add anything. Asks the Gemara, why didn't they say what they said above? Which is also a great halachic point. So indeed, the Gemara says, they told Rabbi Yehuda both points. Number one, katan yisa. And therefore, again, halacha does not attach any credence to a observation that was made by a minor. And number two, even afilu gadol yisa, still, so if there would have been another minor, you would have been bar mitzvah. So what? Rabbi Yehuda would not protest, but that doesn't weigh whether we paskin that way or not. Next mission.
Rabbi, why can't you see what Tarfin holds the same way?
We didn't have to do that. We didn't even have to do that. I think the more Tanoim hold the same way, the more credence it gives to that opinion. I think we're trying to isolate by saying it's only Shitas Das Yachid.
What would be the difference between raya and observation?
No, raya means a proof. Min hakotan, the word observation is connected to the words min hakotan. You can't bring a halachic proof, or you cannot give credence to the observation of a minor.
And the fact that there were elders and chachamim there is not.
No, if those chachamim would have testified, it would have had a lot more weight. The only one testifying was the one who's saying in his testimony that I did it when I was a minor. That means he was saying he was a minor then. Okay. No, it's the akid. If they were looking to be mated, they would find someone who was an adult while that happened. Okay, says the next Mishnah. The next Mishnah, like like we mentioned in the introduction, we are. It's amazing. We're going to stay focused a little bit on Megillah, but we're speaking about huge topics. And let's get going. We're going to speak about number one, daytime. There is an obligation to read the Megillah during the day. Okay, when is day? Says the Mishnah, you can't read the Megillah during the daytime, nor do the mitzvah of bris milah on the 8th day, nor tefillah. Almost everyone who has to go to the mikvah, a zav, a zava, a tmei mace, even a person who has a zera, you're going to the mikvah during the day. The loimazim, sprinkling the ashes on someone who became pure from corpse tum on the 3rd and the 7th days. Similarly, prior to the way we observe Taras HaMishpacha nowadays, going back to the Ikir Dinei Torah, if a woman has a re'iyah during the 11 days following the 7 days of Nida, one day only makes her tamei, and she only has to count one clean day. Even 2 consecutive days only makes her keep one clean day. She goes to the mikvah during that clean day, loy titpol, she should not go to the mikvah, and all of the above, at chevra shetanei tzachama, until the rising of the sun. Now, there's such an important Rashi. Now, guys, we're not learning Shulchan Aruch here, but we're so lucky to be learning this in the beginnings of everything. Rashi says, guys, the emphasis here is not after Alois HaShachar. Why? Sheyotza misafek laila. This Rashi is very much quoted. Rashi considers the time between Alois and Nates as a time of safek, almost sounding like it's like Bein Hashmashes. Very few people heard these words before. We don't pass in this way, but we're learning Rashi. Now, the Mishnah itself says, that if Amud HaShachar, let's touch, if from when the rays of the sun is beginning to lighten the eastern horizon, or let me say other words, let's go with those who say that Alois HaShachar is 1 hour and 1/5 of an hour Shazmaniyos prior to Neitz HaChama. If it was done post facto, then it's kosher. Says Rashi, the Kulan She'asu, the Ma'alois HaShachar, now it sounds otherwise. Yemamahu. Really, if we would know when Alois HaShachar is, it's really day. But not everyone knows when it is. So now Rashi is explaining himself. It's not that there is a halachic suffix. How do you classify from Alois until Nates? There is no halachic suffix. Theoretically, day begins from Alois, but we don't know where to put the finger on Alois. You want to be certain that you got it right when Nates. When the sun begins to come up, now you are in the day. So holds Rashi. But again, it's important that Rashi uses the word suffix. That's very significant in the discussion amongst the Rishonim. But let's go learn. Now the Gemara, it's going to be very much like a daf and kachim, because we're going to be focusing primarily on sources in scripture to every one of these cases. And it's very simple. So Minalan goes on the first one, Megila. Notice, how do you know that Megillah has to be read during the daytime of the day? The Amar Kra, where it says, V'hayamim, these days, 14th and 15th, should be remembered and celebrated or commemorated. Hayom means Bayoimim Balaylo Loy. So the Gemara makes an interruption. Did we not, learn above that Lema to have a tiyufta that Rabbi Shua ben Levi, the Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi Chayiv Adam Likres Samagila Balayla, and again to repeat it during the day? So you're making it sound that there is no obligation of the night. So answers the Gemara that our topic is only referring to the daytime obligation. Ki katani ad diyoim. Yes, there's another obligation for the night. And again, that there are some of them, Achrayim, who actually hold that the obligation of reading the Megillah at night came after the time of the Mishnah. And they learned, you have to just know how to teach the Gemara a little bit differently. Others who hold that even during the times of the Mishnah, there was an obligation to read the Megillah at night, then it's easier to read the Shtikl Gemara. And as we spoke up when we began this Masechta, if there was an obligation to read the Megillah at night, the whole issue was what upside, what benefit did you give to the villagers by allowing them to read the Megillah, advancing it to the Yom HaKnisa, to the day of assembly? Well, they only assembled during the day. That was the issue we had over there. Okay, let's go back over here. Because we are focusing on the daytime reading. Next, V'loi Moleh. T'chsiv, Parshas Tazria, Ubayoim Hashmini Yimol. Clear, Ubayoim Hashmini, by the day. Says Tosfos. Very important. Guys, second to last Tosfos, we're going to scoot down. It's getting late, but it's very important this. If we are saying that the mitzvah only begins during the day, the Hikshar Rav Ephraim, Kivin the Mila Eino Balayla, that should make Mila automatically into a mitzvah Sasei Shazman Gerama, following the rule we have in the Mishnah and Kedushin. Automatically, Shaham Noshim Poitros Mimena, a woman should be exempt. So why, Frek Tosfos, Frek Rav Ephraim? Why do we have in Kedushin a special limud from the word oisoi to exclude women from the obligation of circumcising their sons? Why would this not fall in the greater category of time-bound mitzvahs? If the obligation would be also at night. The fact that in the first 7 days there is no obligation, that does not make Bris Milah a time-bound mitzvah. Very important. Notice, if the chalois begins from the 8th day, but from the 8th day it goes straight, that's called a not time-bound mitzvah. even though for the first 7 days there's no obligation. But even from when there is an obligation, it's only during the day, not during the night, right? Like tzitzis, only during the day, not during the night. Like we nowadays, tefillin, only during the day, not during the night, or not during Shabbos, not during Yom Tov. That's a bona fide mitzvah saseh shazman gerama. I want to ask an interesting question. Who knows how many mitzvahs from the Taryag mitzvahs are considered mitzvah saseh shazman gerama that women are exempt from? Because, then we have Shama v'Zacher b'dibur echad, so they are included in Shabbos. You have whoever's obligated to not eating chametz has to eat matzah. What's the total number of positive commandments that women are halachically exempt from? Who knows the answer? 14 mitzvahs. From the whole Taryag, they are, I just read this, and the Arizal says that the lachatchila dika twice a day bedika during the Shivas Nekiyim, which means aside of the hefsek tara, a woman makes 14 bedikas. That is to compensate for the 14 mitzvahs that they are not mechoyev to keep. Interesting. Let's go right over here. Oh, so guys, this is a topic that's a mountain. So one answer, Tosfos here says that what? That we would have thought that since bris milah is a positive commandment that carries the penalty of kares, makes it unique. And if not for the special oisoi, we would not have excluded women. There's so many answers on this question. At least we learned one answer here from Harab Rabba Ephraim. As we know, there's only the beginning of Christmas. There's only 2 positive commandments which carry the penalty of kares. Which means, according to Harab Rabba Ephraim, according to this answer, let me go back to matzah. Women should be obligated to eat matzah, not because misha yeshnoi in loiseichu chametz yeshnoi in eating matzah. That will be a question on this answer of the edition, because there's a kares weight. Let's go back in the Gemara. V'loi toivlin, not tefillah, not hazah, says the Gemara Dechsiv and Parshas Chukas. He's a hatoid ala tamei bayoim hashvi'im. So now the iskash tefillah lahazam. No, just like tefillah, it says bayoim, or sprinkling is bayoim. And there we speak about toiveling, so we know that's both tefillah and azaz bayoim. Now there are exceptions. Very few. One exception of tefillah balayla is a nida. And that's the amazing chumrah of B'nai Yisrael shechmiru al atzmon. That it's a paradox, because on one hand, women today keep Shivas Nekiyim. Shivas Nekiyim is only connected to Zivus. A Zava Gedoyla goes to the mikvah during the day on the 7th day. The Nida is the exception that she goes to the mikvah dafka at night after the 7 days of Nida. But a Nida never needs Shivas Nekiyim. A Nida doesn't even need 1 full day of Nikiyus. Let's go right over here. So the Gemara says, Pshita. Why would we think otherwise? Answers the Gemara, no, the Mishnah has to say it. That a shemeres yoyim, a woman who has 1 re'iyah or 2 re'iyahs on 2 consecutive days during this 11 days, she should be like a man who has his first zav re'iyah. And we learned just recently, Uri'iyah Rishayna Shel Zav is like a Balkari. And it says in Parshas Mitzoira, V'zois Toiras Hazav V'asher Teitz Menu Shich Vazera. So the Torah juxtaposes them. Now you know what's amazing? That a person who has a keri, he goes to the mikvah during the day, guys. A man doesn't have to go to the mikvah at night, but he doesn't even have to count 1 clean day. If a man had a seminal emission right now, he goes to the mikvah right now. So one would have thought, Ma Balkeri Toivel Bayoim. Bayoim means he goes to the mikvah on the day of the discharge. You would have thought that a woman who saw a re'iyah during the 11 days, she shouldn't even have to count 1 clean day. Number 1. But then we would add, but for her to go to the mikvah on the same day she saw blood, we know that can be, because it says Kol Yemei Zoiva, on the day of her flow. Kimishkav midasa yihi yela. Yihi yela means will be to her. Yela teaches us. We'll leave it like that. That yela means she has to count 1 clean day. So really, she should be able to go on the day she saw blood. Because of the words yela, she has to count 1 clean day. So without our Mishnah, we would have thought that she only has to enter the clean day. When does the day begin for a Jew? Night prior, we would have thought, as long as she entered the one clean day, night, that a Shemeres Yom Keneged Yom should be able to go to the mikveh at night, we would say Mixas Hayom Kekuloi even for the beginning of the night. Kamash Malan, that's our Mishnah. No, she can only go to the mikveh during the day, but she has to count. She has to have some daytime of the day in which she is looking to see whether there's more blood, thus counting it as clean and then going to the mikveh. The Kamash Malan, Kiva Leboy Sfira, since she has to count a clean day. So Daf Chaf Amad Aleph on the top, Sfira B'Yamama He. That is the rule. Anything that demands counting can only be done during the day. Nu Chavra, what's your question? What counting is not done during the day?
Sfiras Omer.
Sfiras Omer. But here we go. Sfiras Omer, you are counting the day. But you're beginning the count, since the Torah says to Mimois, the full day begins at night. But the day is the count. And what's the proof? I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. The last Tosfos in this Amud is very important. We are familiar with this Tosfos from practicing, from being an observant Jew. What happens if you forgot to count at night? So that Rabbeinu Tam holds, guys, I'm going to scoot down to the Tosfos, look inside the last Tosfos, the second line. You don't make the bracha during the day, but you count during the day. Let me go over here. And the Bahag holds that if you forgot to count at night, you have to count during the day, but you don't make a bracha. And we paskin like the Bahag. In other words, counting is during the day. You don't count during the day de facto, because since the Torah uses the words 7 weeks that are Temi Mois, a complete day begins at the night. They only make the bracha at night. But if you miss the count at night, you count during the day, and you know what you do afterwards? The next night you count with a bracha. That's the word. Because you counted. Because you counted during the day. The Ikin mitzvah you did. You can't make a bracha because of the detail of Temimos. That's the answer. Let's go weiter. Top line of the Amud. Now, like we're learning Rashi, theoretically, day begins from Alois HaShachar. But we have a question whether we can ascertain when is Alois HaShachar. So better do it by Neitzachama, so you, the Gavra, is leaving the doubt. You know, Anamili, that really day begins from Alois HaShachar, Amar Ravam. The Amar Kra, guys, we have this in Psachim, when it says in creation, Ayikra Elikim La'or Yoim, the first way we are to interpret this verse, listen to these words, La Meir Uba Kira'o Yoim, which means that Hashem called the advancing light day. Advancing light means, La Meir Uba means it's not yet fully light. What time of the day is advancing light? Alois HaShachar. That is already called Yom. Now we got a problem. When it says if the way we to be consistent, that must mean to the advancing darkness, God called night. Guys, when do we have a period of time that's called advancing darkness? Bein Hashmashos. Back to our Bein Hashmashos. We don't paskin that Bein Hashmashos is Vaday Laila. We are saying in our Gemara that Alois HaShachar is Vaday Yom. I don't know when Alois HaShachar is. Bein Hashmashos is not that way. This is so good. Bein Hashmashos is a time in which Halacha has a doubt. What is the category of that time? Well, why don't we interpret the beginning of the Torah? So that's not the way you touch. And Hakaim Alon, that's part of the question. Therefore, you don't have a pasuk in Bereshis. You got to go now to Tanach. It says in Nehemiah, while we are working, the Chetzyoim, half of us were holding spears. The key is these words: Ma'alois Hashachar va'atzei sakri chavim. Mashma, that daytime is from Alois HaShachar until Tzeis. And another proof when it says V'hoyu lanu halayla mishmar V'hayoim melacha. That's the reading of the pasuk in Nehemiah. Tells us the Meseidas Hashas. So you clearly see that day is when people work. And what is day? Alois Hashachar, Atzeis HaKechavim. Why do you even need to have? Why did you even need to have the second pasuk? Why isn't it enough to point out that people were working from Alois until Seis? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because just because a pasuk is speaking about people's work ethic from Alois until Seis, it doesn't mean it's during the daytime. Maybe people, as we make an effort when it comes to serving God, to dafka begin when it's dark. So great, like we learned in Brachas. It says a few times in Tehillim that we wake up in the morning. But just because people work from Alois Shachar until Seis is not an araya that it's called halachic day. So my voimet, because Shachar is not called Yamama. Why did people work? Maybe from sunset. Sunset is before Tzeis. Sunset begins the Ben Hashmoshes is already considered night. In Nehemiah, he's writing a fact. That these are people that began their work before Gadei. They worked into the night. That's why we needed to have the other proof from there, the Hemshech and Nehemiah, where it says V'hoyu lanu halayla mishmar v'hayoyim melacha, to point out that work is only during the day. Serving God is by day and by night. But if work is only by day, and the pasuk says that when did they work from Alois until Seis, that is where we have clarity to these dinim. Now, I just want to, there's so much to talk about. But now that
I worked in a place where it said Me'alesa Shachar Atzeis HaNeshama.
Very good, Sama. But I want to say like this, that for certain dinim in the Torah, the day actually ends by sunset, speaking about Hilchas Nida, just to remember that. That for Hilchas Nida, Taka, we don't go from Alois until Tzeis, we go from Nates until Shkia. When it comes to all of the dinim of an oina, when does the oina go? The oina of the day. It has everything to do, like even if you're counting, we count 5 days minimum before we make a hefsek tara. So what is considered the day? Like what happens if a woman gets her period Shabbos afternoon after Shkia before Tzeis? Is it Sunday or is it Shabbos? She has a short period. Theoretically, she can make it already on Wednesday. But for that, you have to count Shabbos, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Still Shabbos. So you have to know. So the din is that if she had her period before it says, but if she had it after Shkia, it's considered Sunday. For the dinim of Taras HaMishpacha, the daytime, the nighttime doesn't follow the system. And there's always exceptions, which makes this so exciting.
Rabbi,
Okay.
for Shos Manios, when we calculate how you get to 12, you do from sunrise to sunset, no?
So that's the big machlokes bekitzer, the pshuki between the Gra and the Magen Avram. That is the machlokes between the Magen Avram and the Gra. That's why everyone who has a luach, exactly. Do you count 12 hours from Alois until Tzeis? Exactly. Or do you count it? That's the argument. And that's our Gemara is such a foundational part of that.
Rabbi, it seems like everyone here says that Tzeis is nighttime, right?
Yes.
But aren't there some opinions that say after Shkia it's already considered nighttime?
No, so you have the other Rabbeinu Tam. So Danny, that's the other big topic that we have the two Tosfos that we speak out. The Shittas Rabbeinu Tam says Kemahalach mil after Shkia, or is it 4 mil? And the Bein Hashmoshes is at the end of the 4 mil. That's another topic. We don't have enough time, but at least we have the zchus to walk, like you walk through Eretz Yisrael. You're driving through it. We're driving through it. Okay, next Mishnah. Guys, let's chaparan. The next Mishnah is right there, beautiful. So it's a hemshech. And this is the last Mishnah of the Perek. So the Mishnah says that Kol hayoim kosher b'yas Megila. And that's such a big statement. Because like Rashi reminds us, there is a rule called Zrizin Magdim El Mitzvahs. And no one is taking that away. So a bris milah, ideally, a bris milah, there's the other topic of Beroivam Hadras Melach, but you have a mitzvah, do it. The sooner the better. Be a zoris. But that's a separate din. Whenever there is an obligation to be done during the day, During the day means any time during the day that we mentioned. So that goes to reading of the Megillah. We go Mefsayim proudly. We go Mefsayim with Megillah until the end of the day. Now, a from a Yid, you have the merit to be brought up, more observant. Read the Megillah in the morning. Why would you delay it? But you can do the reading of the Megillah the whole day. Same thing, whenever we are obligated to read the Hallel, one of the 7 rabbinic laws. So again, it's reason we learned in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, I think, right? That or in Tainus that we read Hallel, Shachris in Rosh Hashanah. Shofar went with Musa. Hallel goes with Shachris. But if I didn't read it in Shachris, the whole day, Tkiyah Shofar, the whole day, the Tilas Lulav, the ganze Tag, the Tfilas Musafin, similarly, the actual Karban Musaf itself, the whole day. Now, there are other dinim. There's called the Asay of Hashlama, that allow Hashlim Kala Karbanis Kulam. These are details that we learned in Sachim. So if you brought the Talmud Shalbeinu Arbayim, you can bring the Musaf. But theoretically, Musaf should be brought by day. Day means the whole day. Levidu Haparim, not to get confused. Rashi says Vidui Parim refers to the Kohen Gadol's erroneous ruling on a detail of a violation for which there is a chiyuv kares and therefore a chatas. Or if you have the Sanhedrin who erroneously ruled wrong regarding a detail of such a negative commandment, the Saktas Hoidius, for which the Sanhedrin has to bring a par, the Kohen Gadol has to bring a carbon chatas. Normally the chatas is a female animal. He brings the male ox, and when they bring the carbon, they say vidui. That is done anytime during the day. Vidui meiser. That's what we have in Parshas Kisavai, that even though there is an obligation to tithe, when you have a keri, when you have the payo, I can separate the trumas from meiseres, but I don't have to give it to the kohen right away. Many people would hold on to it. It wasn't theirs. It's like people now by meiser ksafim. You make money, you put your meiser in a separate account, but you don't have to give it today. You can wait. But there is a time until when you have to give it. And it's during the 7-year cycle, there are 2 such moments. And one is right before Pesach on the 4th year, and right before Pesach on the 7th year, even though it's Shemitah, it doesn't matter. That is when you have to give it. Now, on the Achroin Shel Pesach, that it's Yisrael, that's on the 7th day, you verbalize, funny word, vidui. Confession normally means I'm confessing because I sinned. This is the confession where, honey, I'm confessing to you, I'm the best husband in the world. We're making a vidui that we did all the mitzvahs the way you want. That's a very funny expression, but that's what it's called. It's a confession, vidui meiser, that since we gave to the recipients all the trumas u'meiseres, we say to God that we're that perfect. And the way Hasidus explains that if I view myself as a loser, I will sin more. I have to see myself in a positive light, that I am perfect. If I am perfect, then my failings will be something that I'll try to rectify, that I'll have the confidence that I could rectify. So here is the Kohen Gadol who brings his own par. He says vidui, the vidui that he says on the shiur la'azazel, as we learned in Yuma, during the day, anytime during the day. The mitzvah of leaning on an animal by most personal karbanos, if the gifter, if the one who's bringing it is a man, he's obligated to lean with his hands on the head of the animal. Shchita has to be done during the day. And by the way, shchita, it was speaking about kachim. Shchita of kachim, the chiddush of shchita is because shchita ksheira bezar, but it's still considered the avoida, which has to be done by day. Tenufa is those parts of kachim that have to be waved anytime during the day. Hagasha is flower offerings. Many times the bowl prior to the kmitza has to be brought near the wall of the altar, and that's called Hagasha. Kmitza is when you remove that unique fistful that Kevin loves showing a picture of from most carbon menachas. Now, there are certain menachas that all of it is put, but not that's it. Ula Haktara and the burning of the Kmitza on the Mizbeach. Lemelika is the unique way that you shech the bird. Harbana is called Melika with a nail. La Kabbalah is the receiving of the blood. La Hazoya is the blood that has to be sprinkled or poured on the walls or on the top part by a chatas animal of the Mizbeach. La Hashkoya Soita, the whole ceremony of a Soita. the arifas or egla, if there's a person who's found murdered outside a city, if we don't know who the murderer is, then the closest city has to bring a egla arufa. Ulataharas hametzaira. This is the opening part of Parshas Metzaira, the whole thing with the two birds, etc. All of that is any time during the day, period. And similarly, kol halayla, the mitzvahs that are nocturnal mitzvahs. For example, the cutting of the omer, which should be done night prior. Guys, remember Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva is even if the 16th is on Shabbos, that's one ketzira that you violate Shabbos on. The night prior to the 16th is when you cut the barley. All of the burning of the chalavim and the avadim, even though mitzvasa to bring them during the day, but sheda is to be brought the entire night. And the Mishnah concludes aklal. Davar shemitzvasi bayoim kosher kol hayoim. And davar shemitzvasi balayla kosher kol halayla. Zok the Gemara minolon again Megila. That Megila kol hayoim the whole day. The Amar Krav hayomim eilan niskarim v'nasim hayomim day. The kriyas halel. How do you know that halel should be read and could be read anytime during the day? Because it says these psukim, interestingly, was brought not that long ago. We learned to Sunday regarding not reading the Megillah lemafreya. Same verses where it says in halel mimizrach shemesh, from the rising of the sun ad mevaya until the setting. Oh, and that's clear. From the rising of the sun until the setting. Now everyone speaks out. Hold on. If it's until the setting, does that go back? That goes back to the issue of shkia, to say sakei chavim. Let's leave it at that. Rabbi Yosi Oimer, or we have Rav Yosef and Amoira, Zahayoim Asa Hashem. Next, Tilas Lula of the Chsev Lekachem Lechem Bayoim Orish. Kia Shoifer, because it says Yoim Teroi Lechem. Lumusafim, because it says the body Yoim Beyoim. Tfilas Amusafim, logical. The prayer is in the place of the carbon, right? So if the Musafim is the body Yoim, so then so is the Tfilas Musaf. Now again, guys, if you daven Mincha, you can't daven Musaf. But that's an external issue. Levidui parim, the par koyin Moshiach, the par helam davar shel tzibur, because we learned par for Yom Kippurim. And regarding Yom Kippurim, it says v'chipur ba'ad ba'ad beisa. V'kapar is the bottom of the David. So okay, and now all connected to kapara b'imamahu. Why? Because by Yom Hazeh kapara leichem. Beruchnis it fits. Just like we had on top of the Amid. That sfira b'yamama. Al-pi Chasidus, sfiras means shining. Shining is connected to light. Kapara, wiping clean. The ruchnius, it's a day, dark as sin. Kapara is day. Levidei ma'isa, b'chuli, t'chsiv v'amarta l'fnei Hashem l'kecha ba'ati ha'kodesh min ha'bayis. And now we are learning from Smichus Dorish and Smuchim, the Samuch Lei, that awesome expression, Hayoim Hashem, Hayoim Hazeh, Hashem etzavcha Hayoim, that we have in Parshas Kisavai. So we use the word Hayoim to back to the Parsha of Vidoi Maisa, Smich and Shchita, because it says V'samach V'shachat. So they follow the same rules. And regarding Shchita, it says B'yoim Zivchachem, and by day, Ula Tnufa, because it says B'yoim Anivchem Esoimet. Hagdasha, because we have a hekesh from Hagdasha to Tnufa, as it says V'lokach HaKoyim, B'yado Isha Eis, Minchas HaKenois, V'heine V'hikrev. Melika, Kmitza, and Aktara, and Hazoya. How do we know all of this can be done during the day? Because it says in Parshas Sav, B'yoim Savoiseyas B'nei Yisrael. And Rashi adds, that pasuk is speaking about all that's connected to Hakravas Korban, was anything that's in the category of bringing a Korban, B'yoim. Now, next, the second to last line, how do we know that? Asya Toida Toida. It says in Parshas Nasai, which is the Parsha of Soita, it says over there in Parshas Shoiftim, Alpi HaToida Sheyerucha Ba'ala Mishpat, Daf Chaf Alid, just like Mishpat B'yoim, Afkan B'yoim. We're going to stop over here. We got up to the place, and we're going to go finish the Pedic, God willing, in tomorrow's daf. Going through proofs from Scripture regarding the mitzvahs that are considered daytime mitzvahs, the mitzvahs that are considered nocturnal mitzvahs. The Nekuda is, remember this, Yoim kol hayoim, Laila kol halayla. Now you have secondary layers. The first Mishnah and Brachas, that even though I am able to do something the whole day, there's another concept on me. Or you have, like it says again in the first Mishnah and Brachas, that sometimes the Chachamim said, "Oh, don't do it the whole night." Like so do it until Chatzos. But intrinsically, day is day and night is night. And what is day and what is night? At least what we learned today from Alois until say Sakri Chavim, to be continued.
Rabbi, all these limudim that say Hayoim.
Yes.
How do we know it's not just telling us that it has to be done daytime? How do we know that means that you have the entire day to do it?
That's why Ravina and Avashi, Danny, put the Gemara in before this Mishnah on top of Chafamid Beis. In other words, I think we're using that pasuk in the Chemim. Yoim. Because where else do you have in Scripture a further definition of day? Nowhere. That defines
it. So there's nothing that needs to be done at day that is restricted to a certain time in the day?
That's not true. There's always exceptions. Let's go to Psachim.
There's man Krishma. There's man.
Very good,
right?
very good. Yeah, but by Krishma it doesn't say day, Danny. By Krishma it says uv kumecha. That is easy. But ach by Yom Harishain, so by Yom Harishain means erev, right? We learned to some Psachim, and ach is lamayit. There's always exceptions, but you have to have a proof for that. This is the premise. These guys, beautiful.